It's not about resources. It's about resourcefulness. That's what Tony Robbins always says. It's not about resources, it's about resourcefulness. So success is about leveraging what you have to achieve more. Doing more with less. And I mean, if you think of it, one of the things that, who would you hire, right? There's something that I always thought about when I was hiring. Somebody who was able to accomplish, let's say, this amount, okay, but they came from way down here. And so they had nothing and they came all the way here. Or would you hire somebody who started maybe here with a lot of resources and maybe made it up here, a little bit higher than this person? The first person, did all of this huge resourcefulness to get here. And then the second person who's applying maybe started with a whole bunch of resources and managed to get here, right? I would go for the first guy, because imagine if you get this person here who started down here and made it all the way up here. Imagine if you give them resources, how much more they're capable of, how much more they can achieve with if they get as many resources as this other person, right? It's resourcefulness is the secret. It's the positive thinking. It's thinking about abundance of the cup half full and not half empty. So I want to share a story with you today. It's about Muhammad Yunus, and I studied this guy for a while back because I thought he was amazing, the stuff he did. If you haven't heard of Muhammad Yunus, he is Bangladesh. He's from Bangladesh originally, and he's a Nobel Prize winner, peace winner, for creating the concept of microfinance and microcredit to the very poor. So he basically helps finance the really poor. And he built a business model that showed that this could work, because nobody believed that you could loan money to the very poor. They didn't think they would ever get the money back, and he proved that it was possible. And he did this originally in Bangladesh with women. He believes a lot in women, and he got a Nobel Peace Prize. His big thing is he created the Grameen Bank, and that's where the concept came to life. And then it got expanded into, it went off to be copied into many other developing countries. So it's a phenomenal concept, and Muhammad Yunus came from a poor family of 9 children in Bangladesh, and then he made his way up all the way. He got his PhD. He started doing better and better at school, and then progressively he was accepted into better schools, and then ultimately he got a Fulbright scholarship to go to the U.S. to get his PhD in economics in the U.S. And then from there he became a professor, and he continued studying and working on it. And then there was a big famine of 1940 something, 46 I think. And I mean, coming from the poor, from the Bangladesh kind of reality, he knew what it was to be poor, to not have food. And even though now he was in a completely different world, United States, circulating an upper class, he still had that connection with his past. And so he how did he go from poor, right, to creating this amazing concept that gave him a Nobel Prize, right, out of the blue, right? So basically he leveraged every opportunity he had to grow, right, and study and grow and study and grow until he got to the level where he had access to people, to networks, to knowledge. Second, he was connected, so he acknowledged what he had, right? He had all this access and all this stuff, but he also had he could have just abandoned his past experience and say, oh, when I was poor in Bangladesh, I don't want to look into that. But he says, I know what it's like, and maybe the people in the U.S. have no idea what it really means to be poor and try to make a living, out of farming or very small micro businesses in a place like Bangladesh or another poor country. But he knew he had another thing he did. He exposed himself. He interviewed people in these little villages to understand what the real reality was like. He was expanding his understanding of the universe in the areas that he was passionate about. So he was passionate about economics. That was his thing. His PhD and his professorship was in economics. And second, in poverty, impoverished areas. So this man, phenomenal. He cultivated his passions. When there was a famine, he's like, I want to do something about this. He got invested in those passions. He traveled to Bangladesh to understand what was going on, to see what he could do. Then he united these two passions, his past in eradicating poverty and helping the poor with his economics understanding. And when he was such a unique position to do this, how many people would have come from Bangladesh, from the poor, and made it all the way up to become one of the top figures of economics globally. Like, there aren't that many people who could actually bring these things together and create something phenomenal that changed the world forever, right? Microfinance or microeconomics that would help millions of people that were in poverty to get funding for their businesses. Because big businesses always get funding for expansion and growth. That's easy. But what about the small, tiny little businesses? The people that are struggling on their day-to-day? The majority of people that are going through these struggles. Who's going to help them? And so another thing that happened is he also encountered some level of resistance, of a barrier. I would call it a constraint. Constraints can ignite creativity. If the constraint weren't there, he would have just got, what was a constraint? The banks, he went to talk to the bank, said, hey, you should, loan these poor families, especially the women, you should give them micro loans. The bank said, no, I'm not going to give them because the risk of default of them not paying is very high. I've already had the experience, it didn't work, we're not going to give them loans. If the bank were giving them loans, then he wouldn't have anything to do. He would just set it up and maybe just tell people that, go to the bank and get a loan. But instead, because there was this constraint, nobody was willing to give microcredit. It was to these poor families. He said, he had a belief. Here's another thing. You have to have a belief. Right? So leverage your constraints and you have to have a belief. What's your belief? And maybe your belief is something that other people don't believe in. And that makes it even more powerful to be resourceful, right? His belief was, I believe that these people, given the right conditions, they want to pay back and they will pay back the microcredit. And it can be a profitable business for who's lending the money. And so that's what he did. And then so how did he do this? He took a little bit of risk. He himself funded, because the bank wasn't going to do it, he funded 40-something families. Or women, poor women in Bangladesh, for them to invest in their business. And he walked them through and he supported them, and then he got the return. And he said, okay, there it is. It worked. The model worked for these 40-some families. And he personally invested in that. And then he said, okay, now I need to expand. So then his next job was to influence other people to grow, to get more funds so he could grow, because he proved the concept, so he could grow this and be able to help and support more families. So that's the next side, where he leveraged his networks and his influencing powers and his persistence to get his vision aligned with his passion of serving people through economics, to helping the poor in his home country, and then he made it happen. And he later was acknowledged, still in his lifetime, through this Nobel Prize. Right? Super resourceful man. He had, so what's the recipe of resourcefulness? You need to leverage opportunities you get in life. Right? Know where there's an opportunity. Know how to leverage it. Look at constraints, not as something really bad that's going to stop you. Right? Look at rules as not something that's going to stop you, but something that you can find a way around. Something that you can potentially fix if you see an issue. Belief, you gotta believe in something. You have to have a vision for something. You need to align with your passions. Move in that direction. And and things will just start playing out. Like you're not going to see, he didn't think, oh my goodness, I'm going to get a Nobel Prize because I'm going to find out microfinance for the poor. No, he kind of took a step at a time, building on the elements, building on the constraints, building on what he could offer until he got to that. He got to that one step at a time. Right? So that is how you become resourceful. You need to get into the game. You need to be confident enough that you follow what other people maybe are not following. Right? Maybe nobody else was giving microfinance and microcredit. I thought he was crazy. But he did it. He did because he believed in it. And then he had to convince the world that his model worked and that they too should be handing out microcredit to the poor. And it worked. And it absolutely worked. So remember that. You don't need a whole lot of resources. You don't need to have, a bunch of money, a bunch of free time, a bunch of people working for you, all sorts of a huge network of people. You're going to build on those over time, but you don't need those to build something. He didn't have any of that. And he had to build that throughout a lifetime, but he built something extraordinary for the world that helped millions of people. So again, as Tony Robbins says, success is not about resources, it's about resourcefulness. Resourcefulness is using the fullness, right, of the resources that you have and finding new resources. And what's a way to greatly expand the amount of resources that you have? Just ask people. You have your little resources here. If you tap into your network, your first degree network, then your second degree network, then your third degree network, your resources just grow exponentially, and you can tap into those resources. You can tap into your creativity. You can tap into your resilience. You can tap into your perseverance, to your insistence for something that you believe in. In times of crisis, you need to be more resourceful. In times of crisis where everybody's thinking small, constrained, right? Less. You got to think more. You got to think of what's key, what's possible, what are the pluses and the positives of a crisis, right? The people who are thinking, what can I get out? What can I create in a time of crisis? They're going to create amazing things coming out of it. Right? So think about resourcefulness. How can you be more resourceful today? Have you been resourceful in the past? I'm sure you have. There's a moment in your life that you had a constraint, that you had a struggle, that you had a challenge, and you were resourceful. You found a way through it. Every successful person out there is resourceful. Because if you're not resourceful, you're pretty much limiting yourself a lot. Or you could become here, but you're staying here. So think about, how can you be resourceful during this crisis? What can you do to achieve that next level? And what can you do today? What do you have instead of what do you not have? And what can you have? What can you get by asking? And it's not just about Googling, right, or YouTubing. You're resourceful. Your resources are way beyond Google. You have the world at your feet. You just need to have the courage, the tenacity to step in to those resources and to be resourceful. So be resourceful, my friend. Find your resourcefulness every day during this crisis, and you will be surprised at what you find. I am positive about that. So like Muhammad Yunus, do the best with what you can. Leverage the opportunities. Follow your passion, and look at constraints as opportunities. And I will see you in our next live. Have a fantastic, brilliant, beautiful day and week.